Hey, y'all. This week on the podcast, we'll be talking with Mississippi Department of Wildlife Nuisance Species Program Biologist Anthony Ballard about wild hogs, one of the most prolific nuisance animals in America's history. It's astounding how much damage they actually cause and how much of an ongoing problem they continue to be. It's truly mind-boggling. Lastly, I hope you're liking this podcast. If you are, do us a big favor. Head on over to the iTunes page, give us a rating, write us a review. Enjoy the show. So first off, I always do an introduction. Anthony Ballard with the Mississippi Department of Wildlife and Fisheries and Parks. Man, thank you. I know you're a busy guy, so thank you for your time and taking the time out of your day to come and talk with us for a little bit.
No problem, man. Glad to do it.
Yeah, so the variety of different things I want to talk to you about today, but before we dive into it, kind of just give everyone kind of a brief overview of maybe some of your background and how what you do for MDWFP. Did I say that right? Yeah.
Close enough.
Close enough.
So I'm the nuisance species program biologist.
Okay.
I've been called a nuisance biologist before. I'm not sure what that means, but so I went to Mississippi State, got my degree there, my undergrad in wildlife fisheries science, and then went to University of Louisiana at Monroe, got my master's, did a hog project, research project in the south marshes of Louisiana.
Okay.
And then worked for Louisiana for a short amount of time during the summers, and then came back home. And the position that I'm in now is actually an offshoot of the alligator and fur bearer program,
Right.
which the hog stuff was getting to be such a burden that it was really more than one person could handle.
Right.
And so back in 2015 when I graduated, they were starting to kind of put this position together and advertise it because it was becoming such a big issue in Mississippi.
Yeah.
I'd had the experience from that research project and other experience that I'd had along the way to kind of fill that, and so it was it all worked out really well, and how I was able to come into this job.
Right. Yeah. What did you do in the research project in Louisiana? What did that consist of?
So the research project in Louisiana, we flew helicopter transects in most of your graduate project are 2 years, 2 years of field work. And so we flew transects down there and actually looked at wild hog damage in about a 500,000 acre block,
Right.
and mostly land owned by gas companies and that kind of thing, mostly all private land.
Yeah.
And just southwest of Houma, and looked at how that damage was extrapolated, how much damage was in that particular area, and then did some other work with that, compared it to satellite imagery and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
but anyway, it was a really good project, and I learned a lot along the way. So.
Well, that's a really good segue, I guess, of what we're going to talk about, because I mainly, ask you to come on here to talk about hogs, because, I mean, you know better than anybody, that's like such a hot topic these days,
Right.
especially here. And so I kind of want to go at it like from top to bottom. I know wild hogs, some people call them feral pigs. I don't know if that's any right or wrong terminology to either, but I'm pretty sure everyone knows. It's probably safe to assume most everyone knows they're not native, but I think there's a few discrepancies on how they actually ended up here that maybe you kind of enlighten everybody on.
Sure. So historically, the humans, back then it was the Europeans that actually took the wild living form of the Eurasian wild boar, Sus scrofa, in the eastern part of Europe, and domesticated that line down to the domestic pigs that we're familiar with now.
Right.
So I like to equate it to the wolf versus the domestic dog that we know. So they bred them down. We have different breeds, obviously bred them to be more desirable characteristics, such as putting on weight faster than their wild living variants, having more babies, the sorts of things that are good for production, because that's what they were primarily used for, was for food.
Right.
And so in doing that, most of Europe was very common to have domestic pigs that were raised for food and that sort of thing. So back during the early 1500s, when all the exploration was happening in the New World, all the Americas, it was pretty common practice for the Spanish, the French, the Portuguese, basically anybody that was coming over to explore the quote-unquote New World would bring hogs, because they weren't as big as cattle. They reproduced very rapidly. They had a lot of babies. They put on weight very fast. They tasted great. They were a very hardy animal, so it was a natural choice to go to a place that, okay, we don't know how we're going to get food. We don't know what's over there waiting for us. We're moving around a lot. And so that was a natural choice to bring over, to have a constant, reliable food source in a place where you're not sure you're going to have
Yeah, okay. That makes sense, yeah.
So 1539 was the first introduction onto the North American continent of any of the Suscrofa variety, or of the family Suidae. And that was by Hernando de Soto from Spain. But like I said, he gets sort of the blame now for being the first to bring it over. But like I said, it was pretty common practice in those days. And so, like I said, there's a lot of moving around that period of time. People are getting up, they're constantly expanding, exploring new areas. So, you may have gotten there with 4 pigs, but then by the time it's time to move, you may have 15 or 20.
Gotcha.
And so a lot of times what would happen is, you can't pack all those pigs up and take them with you. So a lot of times they would get abandoned wherever they were, and that's how a lot of the population became established, because they would be free ranged, or they would just, be let out and abandoned and
just turn loose.
Right, and they would revert back to their wild living sort of characteristics, because after all, that's where they had come from to begin with.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. So, so how did we get to that, to it being as prolific as it is now?
Well, so first of all, we look at climate, because in the southeast, hogs don't do extremely well with cold weather, particularly the ones that are closer to the domestic line. And so, and the southeastern United States is really where a lot of the expansion first started, where a lot of the European settlers first came. And so this part of the world got a lot more introduction of wild pigs to begin with, because that's where they were all being dropped off and that sort of thing. So throughout time, like I said before, we know that wild hogs are very prolific animals as reproduction goes, and they're good at being on their own and surviving on their own. In the meantime, humans were doing more and more expansion, urbanization, and there became basically over time more pigs and less habitat, and eventually got to the point where we are now, where there's a lot of pigs everywhere and less and less habitat for them to be in. So.
Yeah, makes sense. Because it's interesting to me. I guess how. I don't know, and it may just be because I was blind to it, but it just seems like in recent years it's just become more of an issue. And you could speak to that, whether it is or not.
Probably the biggest contributing factor to that is, number one, the commercialization and I guess you could say glorification of recreational hunting of wild pigs.
Yeah.
So, y'all would know as well as anybody that, game species, we want that species to be managed. We want it to be prolific. We want those animals, deer, turkey, etc., to be around for the next generation. We want the population to be healthy. A lot of people mistakenly view wild hogs in that same sort of light. The problem is, like we talked about just a minute ago, they're not a native species.
Right.
They're invasive. They were never supposed to be here. And what that means is the habitat and the ecosystems that have thrived here for thousands of years have not had wild pigs as a part of that. And
right.
So when you introduce a non-native species, then you create all kinds of problems. And so, but anyway, going back to my point, we don't encourage the recreational hunting of wild hogs because they're not game species.
Right.
And unfortunately, the spread of wild hogs has been accelerated and exacerbated by people actually moving them around illegally. Inside the state or outside the state, whatever the case is.
Yeah, it blows my mind. I mean, I can kind of understand, I guess, because being from down here, I mean, it's a wild hog. I'm not blown away by it, but it's all I have friends down in Florida. They talk about people from up north that just come down there in droves because they want to hunt a wild pig, and I just don't see the appeal. I'm like, man, I don't like those things. I mean, I understand killing them for the reasons that I would kill them for, but not for they're looking at them as a game animal, like you were talking about.
And unfortunately, people, when there's a dollar to be made, people capitalize on that.
Right.
So there's guide services and that sort of thing or even just individuals that have them on their property that will charge somebody like that, maybe from the Northeast or whatever the case is, that that haven't ever hunted that animal, that want to hunt that animal, that views it as that grandiose type idea to come down and kill. And unfortunately, that's the reason why there's so much illegal transportation, is because there's a lot of money to be made out of it.
Yeah. How much do you think, if any, that like the recreational hunting and the glorification of those animals, how much do you think that's added to the problem? Like pretty significantly, or?
I would say pretty significantly, yeah. Because, like I said, there's the commercialization of it, and just the money to be made. Short answer is yes.
That's a shame. It really is.
It's probably the illegal transportation of hogs by people is far and away the biggest management issue as far as getting them under control. Yeah.
Is that still does that go on pretty regularly? Like, is that something y'all have to deal with constantly still?
All the time.
Really?
Yep.
That boggles me. It does. Like, obviously, because you work, I mean, that's what you do. But I don't understand how, like, a sensible person, you couldn't get that point across to them. Like, do you know what those things? Which again, that it kind of gets me to my next point. I don't think a lot of people understand to the degree how much damage they can cause.
Right.
And I know firsthand from dealing with it how much damage they could cause. So, like, let's kind of go into that a little bit, like how destructive they are to properties.
So the agricultural type damage is what we sort of associate with it. It's an easy thing to assign dollars and cents to, because you have a farmer or a producer that knows what he planted. He knows what's taken out of that.
Right.
A lot of things we don't think about is the ecological effects, the microbial effects in the soil, the effects in the marsh. These animals eat. They're classified as opportunistic omnivores, which means they will literally eat anything that gets under their nose. And so $60 to $70 million is the estimate from a last study that MSU Extension did just in the state of Mississippi as far as agriculture goes.
$60 to $70 million.
Right.
Holy smokes.
But like I said, that's just the agricultural side of it. That's the stuff that's pretty easy to count and go out and get a figure.
Right.
But things like alligator eggs in the marsh, sea turtle eggs on the beach, species composition changes in natural ecosystems, all of those things that are much harder to assign a number to and a dollar and cents figure to, that make just as much impact. They just don't quite come across the same on paper.
Right. Yeah, you can't put a dollar figure on them that easy.
Exactly.
So 60, 70 million is basically a conservative estimate. Like, it's not really.
And I think the latest USDA figure nationwide is something like $2 billion.
$2 billion.
Yeah.
Oh. And there's still people live hauling those things around.
Yep. And to go back to that, to kind of put it in perspective, I was at a conference not too long ago, and I was talking to one of the biologists there. I believe it was Minnesota. And we were talking back and forth. And, of course, it's fun to be at those type conferences and exchange information and thoughts from different state agencies and that are dealing with the same problem. They don't have many populations, but the first few populations that they've had pop up there in the state, recently in years there have been some genetic works where people can actually pinpoint what populations came from where geographically by using DNA sequencing. And so they had done that in the state to see where these populations had come from, and it was states like Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama that had shown up in Minnesota. And just to put that in perspective of how prolific that problem is, how much money is being made, unfortunately, illegally, that somebody's willing to load up pigs in a trailer in Louisiana or in Georgia, Mississippi, and cart them all the way across the United States and drop them back off.
That's bananas.
Yep.
There's other words I would use for that. But golly, the things that a man will do for $1.
Yep.
With no, like, I'm sure you don't either. Like, I can't get on the same level of thinking they're at. That's like a quick dollar with like no concept or no worry of what the consequences are in terms of the land.
Right.
Or anything.
Primos Takeout System, feed, seed, and mineral, making it simple and easy for you to grow good food plots and develop a year-round strategy to boost health and growth for the deer in your area. Go to Primos.com now to receive 20% off all takeout products through August 7th. So just a few more days left. And we're still offering free shipping on the entire website for orders of $75 and more. Check it out.
Golly. That's frustrating. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir talking to you.
Absolutely.
Like, I mean, some of this, and if I ask like a question that you can't answer, is like how often, like you say, like all the time, like how often are you catching people live hauling? Is that like a weekly thing, like a day, or?
Well, I couldn't really give you a frequency of it. I can just tell you that it does happen often. And like I said, it may be something as large as a big group of pigs that are in some type of cattle hauler or something like that, or it may be a couple pigs stuffed in toolboxes. It's just, people will figure out any way to haul them and to release them. And the thing that makes it so hard to enforce is, if they're not visible from outside the vehicle, you have to have a reason you have to have some type of probable cause to check that person.
Right.
And then when they get to where they're going, it takes that long to release the pigs. It takes no time at all. You just open the door and they leave. So it's a really hard thing to enforce from that perspective. And I'm not enforcement, so I can't speak to the methods and how all that's done.
Right.
But I can tell you that it's far and away one of the biggest problems we have.
That's disheartening. If you're listening to this and you haul live pigs, stop.
Please stop.
Stop doing it. Golly. That's So let's I know, and I've spoken to this before, spoken about this before. I have a cousins that have a farm in Holcomb. They deal with pigs all the time, tear their crops up.
Mm-hmm.
I promise you, they're not hauling any live pigs. They hate them. They they trap them because they dang near have to. You know.
And a lot of the people that own property and have crops and try to do things on their property understand, that realm of, okay, this is a horrible thing.
Yeah.
We need less of these pigs and all that. But unfortunately, the people that are profiting off of it are usually not the ones that are having to combat the problem.
Yeah, yeah. Do you ever run into, other than, it's blatant the people that are hauling it, but do you ever run into people that are kind of not concerned about them? They're like, I just don't see what the big deal is. They don't really see the problem for what it really is. Do you deal with that ever?
Yeah, and honestly, that's what, and I didn't mention this to start off, but part of my job is public education.
Right.
And so we've had a recent push as far as distributing public education materials called Operation Hog here in Mississippi. So you may have seen target places like co-ops, hunting stores, any locations like that where there's liable to be some agriculture and hunting and outdoor type clientele that come into that area to say, hey, just a Cliff Notes version. Here's why pigs are bad. Here's why we don't want them. Here's the problems that they cause. If you see anybody moving around, please call this number. And so public education, that's one of the biggest battles in the in the wild hog program that we face is actually getting good, sound, scientifically based information out to say, look, here's the truth, here's the reason why we say these things, and change those people from apathetic to actually caring about it, because I can tell you that they affect crops, and if you don't have crops, you don't care as much.
You're like, well, what I care,
Right, but if I say they can spread to possibly you if you ingest the meat and you eat hogs, well, now you care.
Right.
And so it's trying to press enough of those buttons where it hits home to people, and actually they understand, oh, well, this is a much bigger issue than some farmer in the Delta getting his corn eaten.
Right. I think, and obviously this isn't you couldn't replicate this experience that often, but I remember the first time I saw hog damage firsthand, and I wouldn't even grade myself as apathetic, but I just didn't give it the credit it was due. Like the first time I actually saw hog damage with my own eyes, I was like, oh my gosh.
Yep.
I just had no clue that they could be that destructive. Is there any online resources? I'm sure there is.
Sure. So we have our website is MDWFP.com. That's Mississippi Wildlife Fisheries Parks.com. We have a web page. It's Wildlife and Hunting, and then you go down to the Wild Hog Program that has the regulations here in Mississippi as it pertains to wild hogs. It has a lot of information, some of which we covered here, kind of a Cliff Notes version of all of it, life history, habitat, preferences, history, that sort of thing. MSU Extension also has a really good website. It's called Wild Pig Info. I think it's .com. And those are probably the two best. There's a few PDFs, Landowner's Guide to Wild Hog or Wild Pig Management.
Yeah.
But anyway, there are several very good websites. Those two I'd recommend.
What we can do, like when we post this episode, I can get some of those links from you.
Sure.
And we'll do like the Instagram swipe up things where people can swipe up and take you straight to them. Because like here's my deal, especially on stuff like that. Information is so easily accessible these days that especially there's no excuse anymore. There's no excuse for hauling a live pig, and there's no excuse for not understanding how bad these things are and how much of a problem it actually is. So as far as like control of the species, is there like I said, I know hunting them is a thing kind of, but like is trapping? I know that's kind of, I don't know if popular is the right term or the more preferred method. Is like, what have you seen to be, if anything, that's actually kind of effective towards controlling with hogs?
Well, so the few things that we've seen, I guess not the few things, but the most effective situation, I guess, that you can put yourself in is, number one, whatever method it is you choose to use, don't wait until you have a big problem. Wait until you, the first time that you see hogs on your property, the first time that you hear of hogs on your property, if it's two, do something right then. That's the time to do it. Because, wild hogs can have an average of 5 to 6 piglets per year, per litter, and they can breed twice a year. They can have as many as 14 or 15 offspring per litter. And so that's a potential if they all make it and they're maxed out with the reproduction of one sow introducing 30 new piglets to the population in 1 year. So if you think about that in perspective of how quickly that problem can get out of hand, and I hear it all the time, on a property, on a hunting camp or whatever it was, we saw a few pigs the first year, and then the next year we saw a lot more, and then this past year we killed more pigs than deer, and then the next year it'll be we don't see any deer anymore, we don't see any turkey anymore, all we see is pigs. And the problem is that problem started like this with one game camera picture of a boar running by,
right? And
then the next year, the next 2 years, you have this giant problem that takes thousands of dollars and hours to solve. Trapping is the best option for sure, because what it does is people think you set it like a mouse trap. You just put it in there and set the gate. What you actually do is you're training those pigs to trust your trap, to where that entire sounder, that social group, all comes in at one time, and you trap them out. And there's not another method right now that you can do that with. And so, shooting at night or shooting them off the deer stand or whatever, you're really not actually doing anything.
Right.
You're moving them off your property most likely for a short amount of time, and then they're going to come back. You're not actually, solving the problem. You're basically blowing the leaves off of your driveway onto somebody else's.
Right.
And you're not actually solving the problem there. So, like I said, trapping, trapping done right is the best way to reduce the population right now.
Is there anything like general, just like anything you could speak to as far as like trapping done right, as far as what people could do?
Generally, bigger is better, because you're dealing with incredibly intelligent animals, wild hogs.
Which is, I want to ask you about that too, because that's always like a common misconception. I don't know why people just assume pigs are stupid, and they're not.
It's with the stuff that I've seen, they're up there with like dolphins and that kind of stuff. They're extremely intelligent.
Right.
But the good thing is it also makes them very trainable. And so if you can train those animals, so you start out with your trap, like I said, because you want to make that trap seem as little like a trap as possible. You want to have as much open space. If you can have doors on either side where they can see all the way through, that's a good thing. Basically, your entire intention is to make that trap feel as comfortable as possible for a pig, preferably an older pig that knows better, the ones that's breeding and contributing to that population, to go into that trap, to trust it. Because what's going to happen is when you first have a sounder that walks up, the smaller juvenile hogs are going to be the first ones to go in.
Right.
They're going to go in and eat the corn. They're going to go, oh, this is great. And all the older sows, the ones that you actually want to catch, are going to stay outside. They're going to watch those little ones eat. And after a while, it may be a week, it may be a month, eventually those hogs are going to get tired of watching those little ones walk in and eat night after night. So what you're going to do is you're going to actually train those hogs to trust that trap. They get nothing but positive reinforcement out of it. that's when you set it to catch. And so it's important to have a game camera to make sure that you're monitoring all that,
Right.
to make sure that all those pigs are coming in like they're supposed to, so you'll know when to set your trap, so that when that gate falls, you've got it all in one sweep. You don't have to worry about cleaning up pigs that were left outside or anything like that. You've got that whole sounder, they're removed, and you can start on the next.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, those things are incredibly inept. And they've got those. There's some of those trapping systems now. Like they've got like the live monitoring system. You can drop the gate from your phone.
Yep.
You know, I think it was a Jaeger Pro. I think it was called. Or
there are several companies out there that have them now that either send pictures, shortly after they've been taken, or even up to the second live stream video.
Yeah.
We have several in our department. They're great if you can spend the money on them. They're extremely effective. It brings a level of control that you just can't get with a manual trap, because you can literally see everything. You can check and see how much bait you have. You can check and see when your pigs are coming in. I mean, literally everything about that situation you're controlling. You're not going to accidentally catch anything. And on some of these systems, you're talking about a delay time, a trigger time of basically nothing.
Right.
So it's all, you can kind of plan it around your schedule, and it's all, right there in front of you.
Yeah. I can, like I said, my cousins, I'm not sure exactly what kind of traps they have, but like I said, they do that because they have to. If they don't, they would destroy all their crops, and, obviously that's their livelihood,
Right.
It's terrible. What about, like, it's here talking on things that make it, make someone pay attention that was previously apathetic. What about, like, threats to humans as far as, like, all the diseases hogs carry?
So the two main subsets of people that are the most at risk are, number one, slaughterhouse workers, and number two, people that hunt and consume wild hogs, as you might imagine.
Right.
So freezing the meat, a lot of people, when they butcher the hog, they may take proper precautions, and then they bring the meat back out of the freezer and they handle it as if they would any other meat in their household. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of those diseases that can be transmitted to humans are not killed by freezing, and so that's still a dangerous thing. Brucellosis is probably one of the biggest ones. That can get in any open cut that you may have on your hands that you don't even know about.
Yeah.
You can also get it from ingesting meat that hasn't been cooked thoroughly, so less than 165 degrees Fahrenheit is pasteurization for pork. And so there are a lot of pathways that could possibly that you could get it. And one of the things that makes brucellosis particularly bad is it's chronic. So once you get it, you can treat the symptoms, but you never actually get rid of it. And so it's a pretty high price to pay for not taking precautions. So, what I tell people, at the very minimum, please wear rubber gloves, because I promise you have little nicks and cuts on your hands that you don't know about. Cover any sort of mucosal membranes you have, eyes, nose, mouth. Don't eat or drink while you're slaughtering or processing your pig, butchering, anything like that. If you choose to eat it, those type things, even tobacco products and gum, people don't really those type things you don't even think about. If you're not taking those proper precautions, you're just playing Russian roulette.
Right. Yeah. So, like, you being as educated and spend as much time around them as you do you still consume wild hog yourself, or you just go, it's not worth it?
Well, it's just kind of a just kind of a personal preference to me that I don't.
Yeah.
It's kind of like walking through a chicken house and, choosing not to eat chickens. It's just kind of, it's kind of a psychological thing. I always joke and say I know too much about them to eat them.
Right.
And like I said, I don't necessarily, object to anybody else eating them. And I know a lot of people do, and I have before, but it's just one of those things that I choose not to personally. And I really don't go out and hunt them, and all the ones that I do dispatch and dispose of are for the agency, so I really don't have a lot of independent recreational time where I have an opportunity for a lot of hogs anyway, believe it or not.
You probably wouldn't want to.
Right.
Yeah, because I've always thought about that. I've eaten it before, but then I can remember we did learn. We had someone come and talk about them when I was at Mississippi State,
right? And
I can remember at some time thinking, I was like, there's like so many other types of wild game that I could go after and try to eat than try to deal with this one, or than try to deal with trying to eat that one. I just seem like the negatives kind of stacked up as far as like if I don't do such and such right. But I'm like, it's the same kind of boat. I'm not like discouraging anyone from eating them. That's just, my personal
and
preference.
there are people that have eaten thousands and thousands of pigs, and like I said, it just takes that one. But as long as you're using proper precautions, you can eat hundreds of infected pigs, and if you're using those proper precautions and cooking your meat thoroughly, then you would be okay too. So but they're just, the disease risk in hogs is so much more than it is with something like deer or turkey or a lot of our other native game species, that to me it's just not worth the risk. And like I said, just personal preference.
Yeah. Well, I've seen like firsthand, buddies like kill a pig and they just kind of like bare hand go grab him by the legs and start hauling. And I'm just like, don't do that, because just from that one little study we did at Mississippi State where I learned, I was like, don't touch that thing.
Yep.
It's just too much that could go wrong.
That's right.
I remember seeing pictures from, pretty sure it was brucellosis, picture of somebody's like hands where they got it. It just looked awful.
Yeah, brucellosis, one of the things, or one of the main symptoms, besides flu-like symptoms, which is like every disease, right? But extreme joint pain, and so you have a lot of swelling and joint pain. It's almost like a really bad case of arthritis, but it's in most or all of your joints. So it's a pretty bad deal. It's not good.
Is there any like record or knowing like how often hog transmitted type diseases occur? Is it like in Mississippi, is that something that happens a lot or not really?
You could look up brucellosis cases, but there's several different strains of brucellosis. There's brucellosis abortus, which is also in cattle.
Right.
And so, whether they got it from, there's been people that have contracted brucellosis abortus from vaccinating the live bacteria into cattle, to immunize them. So, that kind of stuff would kind of cloud the water as far as, clear cut, this is how many people got them from wild hogs. The Mississippi Department of Health keeps track of all those brucellosis. Any of those reportable diseases. They keep track of that. I'm sure you could get a hold of a number, but like I said, I don't know that you could narrow it down to specifically this is how many got it from wild hogs.
Yeah, understood. That's just something I've been curious about. Yeah, man. Like I said, I always know that they're bad, but it just never. The biggest takeaway from this so far is that $60 to $70 million, and then that's really not even. It's more than that. Like, man. I don't really have anything else to add. I think we covered all that as far as the stuff that I wanted to hit on, unless there, anything that you've got. But I know for sure I appreciate your time and taking the time and come in and educate all of it. Heck, I learned some today,
No problem, man.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Yeah, for sure. So, takeaways. Guys, again, if you haul a live hog, don't do that. Like, just please stop.
And I should say that there is a permit in Mississippi that you can get, a 24-hour permit that does allow you to transport live wild hogs. Mm-hmm. And so what I was referencing to before was the illegal hauling without a permit.
Right.
The purpose for that permit is for potentially, especially this time of year, it's 90-something degrees outside. You kill a bunch of hogs, and you want to have that meat to, whenever you get back to your property, potentially from the time you leave one property till you get to another one, the meat could possibly spoil. And so the purpose of that permit is to haul them to your residence live, to put them into a container, not a container, some type of enclosure, 500 square feet or less, for the purpose of slaughter. That's how the rule is written there.
Yeah.
So it's very specific in the interpretation. And so anyway, I should say that there is a way that you can do it legally, but the problem is the majority of people don't, and they don't do it for those reasons.
Yeah, they're not hauling it, and they're not hauling across. That purpose of that permit isn't to be hauling across state lines to take it to Minnesota.
There is no permit that you can do that.
Yeah,
with, no.
Thank goodness. Yeah, but people are still doing it, man. Well, thanks, man. I can't thank you enough. Thank you for the education. You're an interesting guy, and I'm sure these daggum hogs keep you pretty busy. So.
I enjoyed it, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, that's all for today. Thank y'all for listening. If you have any questions pertaining to this, send them in. When we put this episode up, we'll put links to some of those web resources that Anthony spoke of. And, we're done. Thank you, man.
All right, no problem. Have a good one.
Yeah.